everyone, and welcome to another episode of Liberated Panda Live, right here on Second Gen with Jason and me, Angel, your co-host for the day. Jason. Hi, everyone, and welcome.
Today, Angel and I will cover a bunch of major highlights this week, including the controversy surrounding the WHO, so people don't get confused, and the report regarding the origin of the coronavirus, plus the recent uptick in COVID cases in America.
We'll also provide an update on the Manhattan DA's criminal investigation into Trump's financial records.
Then we'll discuss our first topics of the day, which is all about China's controversial wolf warrior diplomacy. What exactly it is, who are the players, and what's the goal of this type of diplomacy?
Finally, we're super excited to go over Biden's new $2 trillion infrastructure proposal that came out in the middle of the night yesterday. So what's in the proposal, who will benefit from it, what obstacles could derail the passage of this proposal through Congress? We'll talk about all of that.
But first, let's talk about another controversy coming out of China. I'm talking about the COVID report recently released by the World Health Organization, more commonly referred to as the WHO.
Right, like, or WHO, WHO, right? So why is the WHO or WHO report so controversial?
Well, they basically said that the COVID-19 virus was not made in the lab. They were sent there to investigate the origins of it. China kind of blocked some of that investigation, and they came back with that answer that it was sent to or was transmitted and jumped to human beings naturally. A lot of people really don't believe it, especially since we know that sometimes the Chinese government can block facts from coming out.
All right, I have two issues with the WHO report and China's handling of the investigation. So first of all, kind of to touch upon what you were saying, scientists around the world seems to have discredited the idea that the origin of COVID-19 was man-made. So if that's the case, and if China should have nothing to hide, then why wouldn't they actively want an independent investigation of where COVID-19 came from? It would clear China's name among like many people, many skeptics around the world who don't believe the official reports, right?
I mean, totally fair. I agree with you 110%. What do they say? Sunlight's always the best disinfectant. So we'll see. Look, if it looks like a quack, duck it.
Right. And
So we'll see.
and I exactly. And I guess my second issue with the whole WHO report is, China limiting the scope of the investigation into the origins of COVID-19, right? It sets a very dangerous precedence, in my opinion, for future pandemics for other countries, especially autocratic countries. They can follow in China's footsteps because they're setting this precedence and not allow investigations in other countries in the future. And as a result of that, the entire world would suffer due to the lack of transparency, because it'll reduce our chances of fighting future pandemics because it limits our knowledge of, how like viruses work, where they originated from, and it just takes one more tool out of our arsenal of fighting pandemics.
Mm-hmm. Are you surprised though? I mean, it's kind of par for the course, as they say. This is what we normally get. China seemingly blocks a lot of investigations.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's very suspect. And a lot of experts here in like around the world, and not just in America, but a lot of experts who, even if they're like, yes, like as of right now, because scientists are saying this is a discredited theory, we believe that, right? But if that's the case, then what's the harm in investigating whether it came from a lab? Because, if you recall, Wuhan is, home to the Wuhan, like a lab, the Wuhan lab, right? Where they were like testing and experimenting and researching, like coronaviruses, right? And other, and other like other illnesses, I guess, or disease, or I don't know the scientific term for it. So it's not like the reason I don't think people are trying to scapegoat China. If it was anywhere else in the world, anyone would have the same question about the proximity of that lab to the wet market, right? So
Right. But
that's why.
apparently in the wet market though, that species of bat isn't really sold much from what I've heard at least. So the kind of the rationale they're using just doesn't seem to fit, and they haven't answered for that yet. They haven't really given us a clear path, I guess is my biggest issue. Like you would think by now, a year and a half later, we would have a clear path of how it happened, and we are
Yeah.
still completely in the dark. We have people going in and investigating and no answers, just like, okay, good enough. And that really isn't good enough for most people. And this is why people who follow conspiracy theories keep following conspiracy theories, because
Right, right.
they can't come out with something to satisfy people in the information age, and that's just kind of where we are.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people, and this is anecdotal, but a lot of people on social media, and myself included, because we've experienced, like I got COVID, right? I don't know if you have, Jason.
Yep, I have as well.
Right. Oh, but I remember. But your symptoms are quite mild, right?
Pretty, yeah.
Right. I got it right when the pandemic hit in America last April, and the symptoms that I had, other than like fever and like body aches and whatnot, I had 4 months of what they called COVID fatigue, and it was, I couldn't even walk 3 or 4 steps without losing my breath for a good 4 months. And for a lot of people, it's like 16 months. If you talk to doctors, and this is all speculation, obviously, because, the scientific community all agreed, this is speculation and this is discredited, but I'm just saying, like, this is why people are concerned. So like people on social media and people that I talk to, and even doctors, they're saying that like the symptoms of COVID-19 presents itself in such different and weird, unique ways in different people. There are common factors, but it's not universal. And it's also bizarre to a lot of people that it doesn't affect children, but if it affects the elderly, and usually like diseases like affect people that are like immune compromised, which are children,
Including children,
and the elderly.
young children, young children.
Young
Whereas a
children,
lot of
right?
young children don't have any effects whatsoever, even though they're
Whatsoever, right?
just as immunocompromised as some older people who end up passing away from it. Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of things that do not make sense with this. But that's, we should just do a COVID episode on that, honestly.
Right.
There's just so much. There is so
Right.
much.
Right.
Um,
And I don't want Jason and I to be like seeming like we're pushing this narrative that like China's to blame, and we definitely think that this is a man-made thing. That we don't. What we're advocating for is just more transparency, so we can
mhm.
not have crazy conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, regardless of your personal belief, whether it is man-made or not man-made, everybody just wants the answer. Everybody wants, a good, solid, truthful investigation on how it came about, and where we're moving towards, and we're not getting it, and that's how the conspiracy theories are popping up. So,
Right.
hopefully we do, but I'm not gonna, I'm not losing sleep on it, because I don't know. Whenever China's involved, who knows, right?
Right.
But moving on, more
Right.
COVID news. Just real quick. So a lot of states are opening up. My home state of Texas, we're opening back up. We opened up, I believe, March 5th. Our
Yeah.
COVID cases have decreased, much like everywhere else in the country. They keep going down, even though we don't have mandatory masks anymore. Florida, I don't think, has had mandatory masks for almost a year, and their cases have been doing pretty well. We're seeing more and more states opening up. How do you feel about that, Angel?
I'm conflicted.
Mhm.
I'm conflicted because I work in a public setting, right? Because I'm a small business owner, so I have to like interact with people. But they're actually very strict in New York, and I think because I got COVID already, I don't like, I've read somewhere that you're not likely to get it again for like a good 9 months or
Yeah, they say
whatnot.
about 6 months due to your antibodies that are present. There comes a time where your antibodies eventually like kind of go into hibernation per se. Your body cycles through them if there's not a constant threat. So
Hmm.
you still have the
Okay.
antibodies in your system to be able to fight it. So you
Interesting.
probably really don't get very sick.
So,
Um,
I mean, so yeah, like you were asking me how I feel about it. So I think it's a little bit too soon to open up, and I I'm from New York and you're from Texas, so people from Texas obviously don't believe that, right? And people in Florida don't believe that
well,
as much.
right, and I think like you mentioned, anecdotally now we're opening up, and our cases are going down, or they're steady. New York is not opening up. The states that are heavy mask states are the cases are going up. They're going up either at the same rate, possibly a little higher. So I mean, look, do you think masks work? That's not a conversation we're going to have. But when you look at the evidence, if you don't have masks in Florida, you don't have masks in Texas, and the rates are the same, I mean, the mask thing's a separate issue. But I mean,
Right.
is there really an excuse why New York can't open up now? I don't think it
Well,
is. I think at this point it's basically political, and we're seeing it in the numbers. Numbers don't lie.
well, they're actually talking about a fourth surge right now across the nation. I don't know which states are being hit the most, but my parents are on a cross country trip across America right now because they got the vaccine,
Mhm.
and there a bunch of states in the Midwest that are like most of the attractions are still closed. So I would say a good chunk of the nation is still closed. Good news from New York though is as of today, um, anyone over the age of 30 can get the vaccine. So that's new. What is it in Texas?
I think we're pretty much open. Texas has been vaccinating now for a while. I think they've been doing 1 million doses a week
Hmm.
or 1 million doses a day, or
Hmm.
there are a lot of doses. It's kind of slowed down. I know some states like Pennsylvania have really picked up and vaccinated a lot of people very quickly in the last couple of weeks, but Texas has been very consistent throughout the last month or so,
Hmm.
plus. So I think we're at like 20% of the population's been vaccinated, maybe. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But
That sounds about right.
yeah, we're still, I mean, we're moving pretty good. Everything's good, 3 weeks of data. It's not any outlier compared to the national numbers. So
Yeah.
we'll keep you
So
guys updated on it because it is big information, right? Trillions of dollars at stake on whether or
yes.
not we open up. So
Well, it's definitely a cause for celebration. The only just one final thing on this COVID-19 thing.
mhm.
Now it's become like a race between the vaccines and the variants, right? You have so many variants. Some are coming out of India, some are coming out of South America, Europe. So my concern would be if we open up right too quickly, what if the variants come over here, they further mutate, become dangerous, and the vaccinations don't work against them. So that's the other fear that I have.
Right, but the director of the CDC did just state, I think it was 3 days ago, that as of now, there is no data suggesting that any mutations or any
Hmm.
variants are not affected by the vaccine or your antibodies. So
Hmm.
basically, they are still effective against those. So while it
Right.
is a waiting game, something else could come out maybe next season.
Hmm.
For now, it looks, knock on wood, everything looks in the clear. So we'll see, right? We'll
Right.
see.
Right. Okay. So yeah, like moving on to the next topic, like you said. So the last major highlight of this week is the latest and greatest development in the Manhattan DA's criminal investigation into Trump's financial records. So in a huge blow to Trump, New York prosecutors have subpoenaed Trump organization's chief financial officer, personal emphasis on personal bank statement. His name is Alan Weisenberg, and he's been with Trump um, as his money man basically since the 80s for a Trump organization. And he is extremely loyal to Trump, like one of the most loyal Trump people you can find out there. And he would not have given up his record for anything. So now they're trying to hopefully flip him. I want to make it clear he's not under like investigation. But they did say that if they comb through his personal bank statements and they find wrongdoing, they will open an investigation against him too, obviously. So he's not in the clear. I cannot stress how important this development is to the investigation. It's huge news. because they've been trying to get their hands on Weisenberg for so long, and they haven't been able to. And, he tends to stay out of the spotlight, but he knows about every penny that comes in and out of Trump organization. So we'll be watching the story very, very closely. What's your take on this, Jason?
Well, real quick, I mean, for Weisenberg, it sounds like the way that you described it, they subpoenaed him to get records, and they're going to try to find something against him to pin him in a corner to try to get Trump. Honestly, we probably shouldn't be going after people that way. Regardless of everybody's feelings on Trump and Weisenberg and Trump's presidency, that I think it's a slippery slope. That's not how the justice system should work.
Right. So we'll provide more progress on that. I mean, I agree to disagree on your point, but I hear what you're saying. But I want to move on to our second main topic of today, which is all about China's wolf warrior diplomacy. So let's talk about that. In the vast majority of our Chinese speaking audience are already very familiar with this concept. But for many Americans like ourselves, we're only starting to seriously pay attention to this topic. So, Jason, can you tell us about this controversial topic and what is wolf warrior diplomacy?
Right. So I had not heard the term used before very recently, but it really is something that we've seen now from the Chinese Communist Party for a number of years. So wolf warrior diplomacy has to do with China's aim of really being much more aggressive in foreign policy. In the past, they would just release diplomatic statements, not agreeing with something. They'd handle things kind of behind the scenes. But recently, with Xi Jinping, they've really started ratcheting up the rhetoric, online especially. This term was coined from a Chinese film series, Wolf Warrior 1 and 2, which is kind of like a Rambo movie, very nationalistic, shows a perceived hero rescuing Chinese people in Africa who were being attacked. So that's kind of where it gets its name from. I mean, it's just right now, it's basically China's foreign policy of being aggressive online and in person, as you've seen in the Alaska talks, for example, with the opening statements where they discussed BLM and they discussed perceived racism inside of the United States. That was a form of it. They're really using a lot of whataboutism, for example, online on Twitter. China has used a lot of their diplomatic outposts. Like I know
Wait, real quickly, what's whataboutism for those of
whataboutism?
Us that don't know it?
So it's basically trying to flip something 360 degrees. And I say, let's talk about there is a lot of racism in China. And you say, but you're American. What about all the racism in the United States?
Yep. Okay.
That's not really what we're talking about.
Right. That's
so
what about. Okay. Sorry.
Argument around. Sorry about that.
No. Just wanted to clarify for our viewers. Go ahead.
Yes. So China's leveraging their various diplomatic outposts, like the Republic of Ireland, consulate is one of them. And they try to create viral content and clickbait to draw people in, kind of trick the algorithms to get their views up, and so that everybody can kind of see the propaganda they're putting out. Well, they're putting out a lot of very provocating, conspiratorial content. They're even using some bots, or at least some questionable accounts. I mean, if you go and look at some of them, you see deleted tweets. A bunch have been suspended, I think over 150 midway through 2020, from my understanding.
Yes, and I think we have some of those tweets. If we can pull them up, if possible, that would be, so we could show our viewers. If not, we can look at them later, which is fine. But Twitter is a big mechanism that they use, right?
Mm-hmm. Twitter's big for it. Really the focus, it's not just necessarily to try to push back against anti-Chinese sentiment. It's really provoking a lot of countries as well to try to meet their economic and military goals. So some of these tweets that some people might have seen or heard of, you have Zhao took to Twitter to promote a false theory that the virus may have originated in a bioweapons lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland, which I believe is a U.S. national bioweapons lab. In 2020, there was a long-going dispute between the CCP and Australia with Hugh Shijin from the Chinese state-run Global Times. He even went as far as saying, quote, "Australia's always there making trouble. It's a bit like chewing gum stuck on the sole of China's shoes. Sometimes you have to find a stone to rub it off." I mean, comparing a country to chewing gum on the bottom of your shoe is pretty low. And that was all about wanting an investigation into the origins of COVID. I mean, right?
Yes.
Which they literally just stymied. They just basically stopped it. So, I mean, right there, what we talked about earlier, you have your answer to that, how they feel.
They're like an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend gaslighting you.
I mean, yeah. Late 2020, Zhao Lijian again used his account to circulate a digitally manipulated image of a child having its throat cut by an Australian soldier. That's apparently a lot of commentators called it a pretty sharp escalation into the Chinese-Australia dispute, which has been ongoing now for a couple of years. And so just these types of things, couple that along with the statements in Alaska, in the opening statements, and you just kind of see how the rhetoric's just been ratcheted up, right? Instead of having a conversation, a lot of Chinese diplomats, they really now are kind of like, punch you in your face with their words and then ask questions later. So that's
right. So you already answered the question to this. So like, who are the major players? Because I was under the notion, and I think I'm wrong, that wolf warrior diplomacy or wolf warriors could apply to any person advocating for the CCP, but that's not right. Correct?
Well, when you talk about diplomacy, it's kind of it's a very specific, not measured, but it's planned. It's planned actions to get your point across, to get your goals met from the government itself. So it's from diplomats or representatives of the government. Now, what you're talking about, we always know, right? The CCP is infamous for paying people to basically trumpet or to praise them or to trumpet their accomplishments in the media or maybe other foreign politicians. There's been a lot of chatter about that. I know you've heard us on social media, some of that happening. So it does not specifically refer to that, but rather there are specific diplomats and diplomatic outposts. So foreign ministers, official consulate Twitter sites, their embassies, stuff like that.
Right. So, I mean, I want to say so much more about this because every time I post on Twitter and I post something even semi-negative about China or even neutral about China, I get attacked. So it's very irritating.
We should get attacked for this, and then everybody can look on our Twitter Panda, and they could see it. It'd be fantastic.
Right. Exactly.
Creating news.
But we'll continue, talking about the story, if they further escalate. I think they're trying to move away from it out, but who knows? We'll definitely.
Well, real quick, before we change topics, what do you think? What do you think the outcome is going to be of it? You're saying you think that they're trying to move away from it. Is it good that they're doing this? Is it bad? What do you think the outcome ultimately is?
It's not working, right? It's just antagonizing so many people. They're just trolls. But official trolls.
Official government trolls.
Right. So they're just trolling. And when has trolling ever worked on the internet? Really, So I think, whatever their goal is, if they're trying to they're trying to defend China, and they're just to me, they're making themselves look worse. So
right. I think internationally, you're absolutely right. It's really bad for foreign policy. Everybody's looking at it like these guys are nuts. This isn't true. I think that, they're turning into, they're talking about a wolf warrior. Well, guess what? They're going to be going at it alone because they're going to be a lone wolf if they keep acting this way.
Absolutely.
And a lot of countries are going to disassociate. And I mean, look at Australia. They didn't have a problem with Australia 10 years ago. and now this is just ratcheted up.
Right.
And I think something that's actually escalated all this is Trump. Trump is a wolf. Trump is the wolf's wolf. He's the apex predator. I mean, look at those two. They're going at it, which is funny. And he's actually probably brought on their demise of wolf warrior diplomacy when you think about it.
Interesting. That's an interesting take, but
yes. Now, domestically, I don't know how it's playing out.
Right. I'm sure it's a hit, but we want to briefly talk about the last topic of the day. It's still a developing story, so it's okay that we don't have too much time that we could devote to it. So I'll just go to the very general details instead of like the nitty gritty, and we'll save that for another day because we don't even know what's going to be in the final bill anyway.
We're going to be talking about this for weeks or months.
Right. But as of right now, I'm personally very excited about Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure bill. I know this isn't popular with Republicans and conservatives and even some Democrats, but I think it's a great proposal. I was reading the outline of it. This is very much a job plan as well as an infrastructure plan. So that's always good news, especially since China is investing so heavily into their infrastructure. In my opinion, if we don't similarly invest in our aging infrastructure, we're going to fall behind slowly but surely. Like our interstate highway is like one of the marvels of like the world, right? Like foreigners come to America and they're like, wow, your highways are incredible. And that was really like a huge hallmark for America. The proposal hits all the right notes, right? It fixes our aging infrastructure. It improves access to quality, affordable homes, and expands caregivers for elderly with disabilities. And you're thinking, okay, what does all this have to do with infrastructure? Well, they're just putting it in there, and they're trying to tie it to inffrastructure. So I think that's
another omnibus bill.
Right, exactly. And on top of that,
omnibus bills.
Yeah, and Jason's not a fan of omnibus bills, but we can talk about what the budget reconciliation because I think they're gonna have to pass it through that anyway. But we'll talk about that next time. Just very briefly, on top of that, the money will go into domestic production of technology and critical goods. Yay, that's sorely needed. And emphasis on the fact that it's going to be only for but focused on making things in America. So that is great because it will award private sectors for making America independent and award private sectors that make things in America. So it also taxes companies that outsource, and the way Biden wants to pay for this bill is to tax the rich, bring back corporate taxes. And there are even some taxes that I didn't know that companies don't pay. Like there are if you outsource, you don't have to pay corporate taxes. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, he talked about preventing companies from kind of staying overseas to hide from their taxes. Trump talked about the same thing. This is something I mean, look at all the tax dollars we use because companies buy up a company here like GE might buy up a company in another country that has a 0% tax rate. All of a sudden they're headquartered there, or they can hide their tax dollars through there. And, they're not paying American tax dollars. It's not because they're good at accounting. It's because they're in a foreign country, or they're paying 5% to like Ireland or something.
Right, which is like even Trump paid more to China in taxes than he did in America. So there you go.
Well, I mean, but I don't think his company hid in China. I don't think it's the same.
No, I'm just saying, like the American tax dollars, if you're an American company, should come to America. That's just how it should be, right?
Right. So, you got to fix the tax code as well, but that's another conversation. I think with the infrastructure bill, a couple of things that have struck me personally. I don't think one thing that everybody really doesn't talk about, and it's just not me living in Texas, but our electrical grid is ancient. We need to fix that, and there's nothing in this bill to fix the electrical grid, at least that I've seen. Maybe I missed it, but it's none of the big takes. You look at Flint, Michigan. I think there is some water infrastructure stuff in there, if I recall correctly. I don't know if it's enough, but that's probably in there because of Flint. So they're hitting the political points, that's for sure. In terms of roads, honestly, it keeps the money federally, which I don't necessarily agree with. Most of the roads are handled by the states, including the interstates. So maybe the money needs to go to the state to handle highways as they deem fit. Most interstates are fine. It's the U.S. highways. It's the state highways. It's the bridges. Bridges are horrible. They're all in disrepair. Our bridge grade, I think our total infrastructure grade's like a D, and most of those are our bridges. States
It's
like
embarrassing.
have a ton of bridges. It's so bad.
Right.
But
It's very embarrassing.
yeah, it is, but it's dangerous too. You saw the bridge collapse in Minnesota a few years ago, and I think
Right.
I think that the electrical grid's a pain point for a lot of people, and
Mhm.
also the bridge health.
Right.
Um,
I
and
believe he does address the electric, like the electric thing that you're talking about. Because I read
I'll look into
something.
that more because I didn't see it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big point, but I think it should be a big point.
Mhm.
Um, I'm worried about obviously the pet projects in there, and also are there strong enough? Is there strong enough wording in there to make sure the money gets to these projects? We still have billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars sitting for previous projects that haven't been used.
Right.
Previous infrastructure projects that haven't been used. I think from the COVID relief bill, even I saw somewhere there was $168 billion sitting for infrastructure that hasn't been used. So I mean, we're not even. How much of this $2 trillion will even get used, and where will it go? We actually, it brings about a good point. We have a massive issue with money that we're allocating that doesn't get spent, and then it just disappears to government coffers. That's something that nobody really talks about, but it happens.
Yes. So
Track the money after something is approved but not done.
no, I totally agree with that, and it's very infuriating. And I know we have to go, so I just want to just say like one thing to what you were saying,
Mhm.
to respond to what you were saying. So the reason why I love this proposal so much is from what I've read, like Joe Biden's experience being in the Senate really, really does shine through here, and I don't know if like he has Elizabeth Warren or like whoever he's working with or Bernie Sanders or whatever, but they're like master legislative drafters, and like I feel like they've closed so many loopholes, and I feel like they're going to get the money into the hands of the right people based on the wording and what I've read so far. So I feel much more confident in this bill than I have for all the other legislation that you've mentioned, where the money goes to, whatever, lobster dinners at the end of the year. So, so that's what I have to say about that.
Well,
Any parting words, Jason?
I mean, we'll see on that, right?
Right,
Sunlight's the best disinfectant, as I said earlier, and hindsight's always 2020.
right,
So we'll go back
right.
and see.
So we'll be, following up on these stories, definitely following up on this infrastructure bill. I know it's crazy that there's another $1 trillion bill on the table, but like that's a story for another day. But it was great speaking with everyone today. We had a lot of fun. If you have any questions, comments, send us a tweet, message us, leave a comment, and we'll always answer.
Yep, and follow us on Twitter. See if we get some curious comments, right?
Yes, at Liberated_Panda.
And
That's our Twitter handle. So we hope you join us next week. Usually we're Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And everyone have a great week.
bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye.